In this video, we're going to continue working on negations, and this time in the chapter on negations, I'm going to do problems 4 through 10. Let's get into it.
Now let's take a look at number 4 on page 73. It says this: Beethoven never played hockey. Now for our purposes, that's going to be scribble P based on what's presented later. It says it's proof. So here's what are the assumptions that we have. We have number 1. If he had played hockey, he would have written hockey music. Assumption number 2. Okay. However, he wrote no hockey music. Let's solve. Let's see. So we got these things. So again, this is the batch of can we do these? Should we do these? In emergency scenarios, do these. So first thing, do we have an arrow not in parentheses? Yes. Do we have a left side match? No. Okay, that's arrow out. Modus tollens. Do we have a contrary of a right side? So right side of an arrow is M. We have squiggle M. So modus tollens says, remember the rule for modus tollens is this: you got an arrow, you get the contrary of the right side, you can get the contrary of the left side. So look, we have an arrow, we have a contrary of the right side, that means we can get a contrary of the left side. The left side is P, which means we can get squiggle P. Modus tollens 1 and 2. That's what we're trying to get. This problem is done. Number 5, it says this: a historic grist mill operating outside Tallahassee, Florida got caught in a bureaucratic catch-22 summarized in the following argument. The argument is actually exemplified on the top of page 74. It says this: the mill will grind corn only if changes mandated by the State Department of Agriculture are made. So line 1, the mill will grind corn. So it will grind corn only if, that means write an arrow right over it, changes are made. And that's actually assumption number 1. But, remember that's a superfluous but when it's on the front of a sentence. So let's see, what's line 2? But the mill is on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's just R. Assumption number 2. And if so, that is, if it's on the Register of Historic Places, then what? Then no changes will be made. Will it make changes? No changes will be made. Assumption number 3. Therefore, so this is what we're solving for, therefore the mill will not grind corn. So we're solving for squiggle G. Let's see. First of all, do we have arrows not in parentheses? We got 2. The left side matches. Yep. Third line, we got R on the left, we have R in line 2, that gets us squiggle C. Arrow out, 3 and 2. Okay, look again. Do we have any more arrow outs that we can do? Any more left side matches? No. Okay, modus tollens. Do we have any more right side contraries? Look at the right sides of the arrows. Do I have, like, I've got C here in line 1. Do I have an opposite of that or a contrary of that somewhere? Yep, I just got one in line 4. So modus tollens says this: you got an arrow, you got the contrary of the right, you can get the contrary of the left. Contrary of the left would be squiggle G. Modus tollens 1 and 4, and that's what we were after, so this problem is done. Number 6 on page 74 is kind of complicated. And basically we have the following 2 variables. We got T, which stands for black travelers are free to eat along the highway, and R stands for restaurant owners are free to refuse to serve black travelers. And here's what it's saying. Let's take the following assumption. Number 1. If T, if black travelers are free to eat along the highway, then it's not true that restaurant owners are free to refuse to serve black travelers. Assumption number 1. And we're trying to prove that this is demonstrating that the following 2 are incompatible. So then it can't be the case that both they're free to refuse to serve black travelers and T, black travelers are free to eat along the highway. This is saying that then these 2 things are not compatible. Now, do we have a left side match? Do we have a T somewhere? No. Okay, modus tollens. Do we have an opposite of the right side? Do we have an R by itself somewhere? No. Do we have a dot we can break apart? No. Do we have an and in we can make? No. Do we have a double negation that we can and should make? Can? Yeah, sure, we can put this whole thing and make it a double negation. No, that doesn't get us anywhere. Is our goal an arrow? No. So this leaves the final move here, indirect proof. What's our goal? Not R and T. So what are we going to do? We're going to provisionally assume the opposite of our goal. Since our goal is squiggle R dot T, we're going to provisionally assume the opposite. What would be the contrary? What would be the opposite or the contrary of not r dot t, just plain r dot t. We're going to solve for any contradiction. It doesn't matter which one we get. Any two contraries, we're going to slap them together. So now, can we do an arrow out? No. Modus tollens? No. And out? Yes, we have a dot, not in parentheses. That's going to break apart into two things. R and T. Both of those are and out on line 2. Now, you might be able to see it. We actually can do a modus tollens or an arrow out. Look, we got a modus tollens available, we got an arrow out available. I'm always going to say go with the top of the list first. Okay, can I do an arrow out? Do I have an arrow? Do I have a left side match? Yes, I do. That's going to get me squiggle R. Arrow out 1 and 4. Now, if I did the modus tollens instead, it's actually going to work out in the end. But I'm going to go with that. Arrow out. I've got a squiggle R. Now look, remember the mission is once you start an indirect proof, get any two contraries and stick them together. Do I have two contraries? Right now I do. Look, there's R, there's squiggle R. So stick them together. Remember, the last move of an indirect proof is always 100% of the time an and in. So I've got R and not R. And in 3 and 5. Side quest complete. Now look, this is saying this. If this is true, if r dot t is true, then it leads to R and not R being true, which is ridiculous. You can't have opposites be true, which means when we zoom out, it means the thing we provisionally assume must be nonsense, which means that the thing that we want to get after is true. This means that squiggle R dot T is true. How do we prove it indirectly? Where do we provisionally assume it's contrary? Line 2. Where do we get a set of contraries? Line 6. This is 7 on page 74. I can make Bannock for you. So if I make Bannock for you, then what? Or it says only if. That means there's an arrow. Only if the oven will get hot. Assumption number 1. The oven will get hot only if. That means there's an arrow. The electricity is on. E. Assumption number 2. 3. The electricity is on only if the power lines are up. Assumption number 3. But a tree brought down by a beaver fell on the power lines. That's just line 4. It's just F. Tree fell down. Okay, and line 5. If a tree fell on the power lines, so if F, then the power lines, are not up. And that is why, so solve for this, I cannot make Bannock for you. Do we have any left side matches? Yeah, we do. Okay, line 5 here has F on the left side of the arrow. We have an F in line 4. That gets us squiggle L. Okay, arrow out. 5 and 4. Do we have any other left side matches that we can do? No. Next thing on the list, modus tollens. Do we have any contraries to right sides? Alright, so let's take a look at the arrows and look to see, do we have any quote-unquote opposites to the right side? Do we have a squiggle H somewhere? No. Do we have a squiggle E somewhere? No. Do we have a squiggle L somewhere? Yep, we just got it. So we can do a modus tollens then between lines 3 and 6. So modus tollens says, remember, if you got an arrow and you have the contrary of the right side, then what you get is the contrary of the left side. So look, I've got here in line 3 E arrow L. I've got not L. Okay, so I've got a contrary to the right side. That means I can get a contrary to the left side. That's going to be squiggle E. Modus tollens 3 and 6. Now with this squiggle E in place, can I do another arrow out? No, I don't have a B, I don't have an H, I don't have an E, I don't have an F, and so on. Well, I already had the F, so I use that. Do I have any contraries to the right side for modus tollens? Do I have a squiggle H? No. Do I have a squiggle E? Yeah, I just got one. So if I've got H arrow E, and I've got squiggle E, that means I can get the contrary to the left side. That's going to be squiggle H. Modus tollens. Where was the arrow that I used? 2. Where was the contrary to the right? Line 7. Okay, that's done. Now, can I do another arrow out? Do I have a B? No. H? No. E? No. F, we already did that one. Okay, modus tollens. Do I have any contraries or opposites to the right side? Okay, I've got an H here. Do I have a squiggle H somewhere? Just got it. So what does that mean? You got an arrow. You got the contrary of the right side. You get the contrary of the left side. The contrary of the left side of line 1 would be squiggle B. Hey, that's what I was looking for. How did I get it? Modus tollens. Where was the arrow that I used? Line 1. Where was the contrary of the right side? line 8. And now this problem is done. Number 8 says this. Blanche was right-handed. 2 wounds were on the left side of her head. Ugh, this is grisly. Assumption number 2. If Blanche committed suicide and was right-handed, so if she committed suicide and was right-handed, then what? She would not have wounds on the right side of her head. So in this case, she wouldn't have wounds on the left side of her head. She would have wounds on the right side. So that's assumption number 3. Hence, what? She did not commit suicide. Do we have an arrow not in parentheses? Yes, we do. Do we have an arrow out? Do we have a left side match? Do we have S.R? Nope. Okay, next thing. Modus tollens. Do we have the opposite or contrary of the right side? Our right side of this arrow is squiggle L. Do we have a contrary to that? We do. L. Now, what does that tell us? That we can get the contrary of the left side. So the left side of this arrow is S.R. We can get, and we should, squiggle S.R. So remember, when you get a modus tollens, when you get the contrary of the right side, you can get the contrary of the left side, as we did here. So we can say modus tollens 3 and 2. Okay, great. Should we do an arrow out now? Modus tollens now. And out? No. Any efficacious and in? No. Any efficacious double negation? No. Is our goal an arrow? No. So what do we do in this situation? Well, we need an indirect proof, which means we're going to provisionally assume the opposite of our goal. Now, the contrary of our goal. Now, the contrary, our goal is squiggle S. So what we're going to do in line 5 is we're going to provisionally assume the contrary of that. We're going to say, we know squiggle S is true because we're going to just pretend here that S is true. It's contrary. And what we're going to do is we're going to go after any contradiction whatsoever. So now with that in play, we're going to see, can we do, and here's what I want you to look for. As soon as you start an indirect proof, here's the thing to look for. Remember, the last move is always 100% of the time going to be an and in. Do I have the pieces to build a set of opposites? So what you want to look for, yeah, we want to do arrow out. Can I do an arrow out now? No. Can I do a modus tollens? No. I already did one. Look and see. When you're doing an indirect proof, first of all, go ahead and look and see, do I have any knots right now? What squiggles do you have? Well, I got a squiggle here in line 4. This one I already got. It's squiggle S.R. Okay? If you got a squiggle, look and see if you have the pieces to build the opposite or the contrary of that. So we've got squiggle S.R. What would be the opposite of that? Just S.R. Do you have the pieces to build that? Look, line 5, S. Line 1, R. Put those together, you've got the contrary of line 4. So go ahead and start to build it. Line 6, S.R. And in 5 and 1. And then look at line 6 and look at line 4. They are contraries to each other. This means that the indirect proof is going to be complete. So look, I can say in line 7, hey, you can get S.R. and the exact same thing with a not in front of it. That's what a contradiction is. That's and in line 6 and 4, which means indirect proof complete. If we provisionally assume the opposite or the contrary of our goal, we get a set of contraries. Now, these are bigger, heftier contraries. That doesn't matter. Contraries can be as little or as big as you need them to be. Here, we have something and exactly the same thing with a not in front of it. That's all you need to complete an indirect proof, which means we can zoom out and say here in line 8, yeah, squiggle S is the thing. How? Indirect proof. S and R is true and it's not true. Can't have contradictions. Law of non-contradiction. 9. This is from Plato's Phaedo. Learning is actually recollection. Line number 1. Greek there is anamnesis. Anamnesis. It's related to our word amnesia. So Plato thinks that we don't learn anything new, we simply remember that which we've forgotten. Because in Greek mythology, when you die, one of the rivers you go across is the river Lethe. Okay, that makes you forget. And so actually, when you're born, it's your soul coming back into this world. And so for Plato, all of learning, everything that we learn, it's not something new that we learn. We're actually remembering something for when we're in the beyond, in his case, the world of forms. So learning is actually recollection. We don't learn, we remember. Line number 2 then. If that's true, if learning is actually recollection, then what we recollect now must have been learned before birth. It is impossible What we recollect was learned before birth unless. So remember, unless means there's an arrow, and whatever follows unless goes on the left side of the arrow with a squiggle in front of it. So what follows unless? Unless the soul is immortal. So look, since M would stand for the soul is mortal, we know that what's on the left side of the arrow is the soul is mortal unless it's not, which means we've got squiggle squiggle M. On the left side of this arrow is the soul is immortal unless the soul is immortal, squiggle squiggle M. Then what? Then that would mean that it's impossible, or it's not the case that what we learned was learned before birth. Assumption number 3. So this one, the translation's a bit tricky. Okay, and then this. All right, now, given all that, prove this. So the soul is immortal. So the soul is not mortal. Immortal. The soul is not mortal. Can we do arrow outs? Yes, we can. We have an arrow here in line 2 and a left side match. That gets us what? B. Arrow out. 2 and 1. Can we do another arrow out? No. Can we do a modus tollens? Do we have an arrow and the contrary of a right side? No. Here we got a match here. Oh, but yeah, in line 3 we have a contrary. So remember what modus tollens says, so to speak, is if you got an arrow and you got the contrary of the right side, you can get the contrary of the left side. So take a look at this. Here we've got squiggle squiggle M, arrow squiggle B. We've got B. So that's the contrary of a right side. So we need to figure out what would be the contrary of squiggle squiggle M. Now we have 2 options here, and in this case I would accept either one of them. One option we could say is, what's the contrary of squiggle squiggle M? And the answer could be squiggle 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 M. I would accept that, except there's something simpler that we can put in this case. Since we know here, now this is not true when we're translating, but when we're doing deduction, okay, what's the contrary of squiggle squiggle M? We could also just say squiggle M. Modus tollens 3 and 4. Now here with this, let's go down the list. Arrow out, no. Modus tollens, no. And out, no. And in, no. Double negation, yes. And in fact, double negation is going to cancel out 2 of these squiggles. Because remember, if you have an odd number of squiggles, it's the same as having 1. So what does that reduce down into? Just plain old squiggle M. Double negation, line 5. Hey, that's what we were after. This problem, therefore, is done. Number 10. Let's look at the reduced form of the argument on the middle of page 76. Here's what we got. Line 1. Or's asking to be grounded is proof of his sanity. If he asks to be grounded, then it would be necessary that he's sane, which means A arrow S. Assumption number 1. Again, these translations are a bit tougher. Okay? Asking to be grounded is a necessary condition for being grounded. So remember, necessary conditions go on the right side of the arrow. So in other words, if he's grounded, then it'd be necessary that he have to be asked to be grounded, because that's what necessary conditions are. If Or is sane, if he's sane, then he cannot be grounded. All of it shows that Or cannot be grounded. First of all, do we have arrows not in parentheses? We have a trifecta hereof. So look, 3 arrows not in parentheses. Any left side matches? Do we have an A? Do we have a G? Do we have an S? Nope, nope, nope. Go down the list. Arrow out? No. Modus tollens? No. And out? No. And in? Let's not. Double negation? Let's not. Is our goal an arrow? No. So what do we do in this situation? Our goal is not an arrow. Nothing else to do. Provisionally assume the contrary of the goal. Our goal is squiggle G, so what we're going to do is we're going to provisionally assume just plain old vanilla G, and we're going to say, hey, let's get any contradiction. Any 2 contraries, let's slap them together with an and in. That's the mission. We do that with this in play now. So now, can we do an arrow out? Yeah, look, 2 and 4. There it is. We get A, arrow out, 2 and 4. And now we can do another arrow out. We get S, arrow out 1 and 5. And now look, with the S, we get another arrow out. We get squiggle G, arrow out 3 and 6. And right when we get that, look, now we have squiggle G and G. Now remember, the mission is get any 2 contraries and stick them together. We have the pieces to do so. G and squiggle G. Stick them together. G and squiggle G. And in. 4 and 6. And remember, the last move in indirect proof is always an and in. So look, we did it. We provisionally assumed the contrary. We got a contradiction. So now what we do is we zoom out and we say what we did. You can say squiggle G because, now wait, you might be thinking here, wait, we were trying to get squiggle G. We got it in line 6. We could have stopped right there. No, and here's the reason why. Because here we're still in the side quest and we have to fulfill the conditions of the side quest. The side quest says, so to speak, once you provisionally assume the opposite, you have to get two opposites and stick them together. Once you provisionally assume the contrary of your goal, you have to get two contraries and stick them together. So you might be tempted to say right here in line 7, hey, but we got the thing we're looking for. No, you didn't, because this isn't a side quest. This is completely separate from the main scenario. This is something else entirely. You did not get it. This is like having... You need $100. Well, you've got $100 in Monopoly money. You do in the side quest. You don't have it in real life. Here we've got not G in real life, so to speak, out in the main quest. How? Indirect proof. Where did it start? Line 4. Where do we get the contraries? Line 8. Because again, don't get distracted by what you need. Fulfill the mission that you're on at the time that you're on it.
That was problems 4 through 10. What I'm going to do in the next video is we're going to work on the subsequent problems. See you next time.